and it's just this beautiful shot. And you know they worked their asses off to get shots like that. It's just absolutely ruined in the pirated version.
Yeah, we had a conversation about this a couple episodes ago. Listen, we don't mind. We're not telling you should do it. We're not encouraging, because we all pay HBO on our HBO Now subscriptions. But if you're going to pirate, don't be the that releases it early and ruins it for the rest of us. Like, let just enjoy it, wait for it, then rip a really clean version and share that with your friends. Welcome back to Shat on TV on the Throne, the unofficial podcast companion piece for the juggernaut HBO series, Game of Thrones. I'm one of your hosts, Roger Roper, and alongside me is my co-host, Gene Jormormont Lyons.
Jacaris.
And unfortunately, Big D Dick Ebert could not join us tonight, but this is our deep dive episode where we share our insights, research, and opinions on this week's episode of Game of Thrones. This week's episode was entitled The Queen's Justice. Jaime and Bronn prove that Saturdays are for the boys as they bro out in the battlefield of Westworld. Jon tries the old lure him into the cave routine with Dany. Bran uses his powers to out Littlefinger. Arya imitates Syrio Forel while sparring with Brienne, yet gives the credit to no one. Tyrion has a crisis of conscience, and Cersei drinks some more. Gene, I apologize. I was on a plane coming back, but you and Big D had a great Instacast. We're getting a lot of social media blowing up this morning. We always take this time to go back and rewatch it and think, to ourselves, well, the episode feel the same the second or third time watching it. For me, I thought it was amazing. It kept getting better.
What's weird about it for me is I watched it, and then I was thinking, man, that really made me want to watch other battles from Game of Thrones just to get that. I couldn't get enough of the battle, and I was very impressed with it the first time around. I went back and I watched a few other battles, and it's a really strange thing with the show because each one brings its own special characteristics to the show. But what I noticed the most was that when I tried to watch the entire episode the second time, I couldn't fast forward quickly enough just to get back to the battle again. It was weird. The first time around, I was gripped by every scene of season 7, episode 4. The second time around, I just kept going back. I watched the battle like 4 or 5 times.
And I know you guys talked about it on the Instacast, but if there was ever an episode that was to be leaked to the internet ahead of time, ahead of schedule, this is the wrong one to do it because the picture on that leaked version did not do service to this battle whatsoever.
There's so many details that you miss. Just the things that were dropped, the way the water was rippling as Daenerys flew over it, and just that there's a really gorgeous scene when Arya. That's the where I first noticed it. But Arya rides her horse and she comes to the top of that hill where it crests over the snow, and it's just this beautiful shot. And they worked their asses off to get shots like that. It's just absolutely ruined in the pirated version.
Yeah, we had a conversation about this a couple episodes ago. Listen, we don't mind. We're not telling you should do it. We're not encouraging, because we all pay HBO on our HBO Now subscriptions. But if you're going to pirate, don't be the that releases it early and ruins it for the rest of us. Like, just enjoy it, wait for it, then rip a really clean version and share that with your friends.
Shame.
If you've never listened to Shat on TV on the Thrones, here's the format for the show. So we don't do like what other podcasts do, which is break down the episode in a scene-by-scene format. Instead, we take big overarching ideas, big topics, big questions, dive into those. But we always want your feedback. We always want your suggestions. We always want to know if we got something wrong or something you like or something you didn't like. You can do that by writing into us. Our email address is hosts@shatontv.com, or you can find us on social media. On Twitter, we're at Shat on TV, and also on Facebook. Just search for Shat on TV Podcast. We take the best emails that we receive from the week. We post those on our website as well as read them Thursday on our Small Council podcast. So make sure you do that. Again, the email address is hosts@shatontv.com. And occasionally we may get things wrong. We may mispronounce some things. So if you have a correction that's just burning at your fingertips, make sure you write in with a title, actually, and then put in your correction down there. We'll read it on Thursday's episode as well. That being said, Gene, what are the topics that we're going to be discussing during tonight's deep dive?
Several great ones, Raj. We're going to talk about callbacks that were littered throughout season 7, episode 4. It seems to be a motif of retrospective going throughout the season, but this was a particularly rich treasure trove of callbacks, and people love those in this show. We're also going to talk about the length of the show. It was particularly short. The meaning of the spoils of war. I'm going to give a rundown of battles that I thought were better than the Battle of the Burninator, as I've dubbed it. We're going to talk about deaths and whether Game of Thrones has a problem killing people anymore. Is there a death problem there? Also talk about Peter Baelish and whether he is the Severus Snape of Westeros. That curious quote, "Chaos is a ladder," that Bran says, the origins of that and what impact it has on the show. And from there, we'll go to Bran's powers. I like to do a little preview of the Golden Company. I did a little research. That's something that Cersei mentions, and I've got some predictions there. Talk about the relationship between Tyrion and Daenerys, and also why the show feels like characters are flying through time so quickly. So a lot to get through in a little bit of time, so I'm happy to get started.
The first topic that we've got here in the outline is all the callbacks. You know, it's one thing that successful shows have done, and that is really bring a story into that full circle, but do it in such a manner that doesn't insult the audience. And we keep getting text messages, we keep getting direct messages, we keep getting tweets directed at us that say, oh, you know, Shadow TV, did you catch this or did you catch that? That continues through episode 4. I thought maybe it would slow down. It seems to be increasing.
Oddly, like Westworld, we're starting to see this motif of circles and things happening in loops. People fulfilling the roles of their parents, and there are some big ones and there are small ones. Tiny ones, like a great comical one where we saw Sir Davos walking with Jon Snow at Dragonstone, and he corrects his grammar from less to fewer, which is a nod to Stannis, who Sir Davos served under, and Stannis had an absolute obsession with grammar as well. It was just a weird character trait about him. And there are also bigger ones.
Yeah, I think one of the bigger ones is Jaime falling into the water and Bran falling from the tower. This was pointed out not only by yourself, but I think one of our Twitter followers tweeted in the screenshots and showed the comparison.
And a lot of people complain that Jaime gets tackled off of his horse and then suddenly he's sinking in deep water. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, I mean, Blackwater Rush is identified as a very deep river in Westeros, and so who knows how the water works there. Again, as you always point out, there are dragons flying around, so we don't know exactly how rivers work in Westeros. But more importantly, I think that it was done to effect artistically to again mirror that Bran scene, and also I think it's signaling that something mystical may happen to Jaime, that this is not a normal journey into the water, that this could be a baptism, a rebirth, or maybe he's going to encounter something that'll change him forever.
The other topic that we received a lot of hits on is this "chaos is a ladder" harkens back to Littlefinger's dialogue that he had with Varys. I think, what was that, in season 3?
And I didn't catch this the first time. I noticed the "chaos is a ladder." It was an odd thing for him to say, and I thought, of course, we got to look that up and see, what the implications are there. Is he quoting something somebody said? Do we have to pick it apart and really piece it together as an abstract idea? And in fact, it was the former, that this is something that Littlefinger uttered in a private conversation. He now sees that it's being said to him by this child who hasn't been around him, and therefore he's startled by it. That whole situation unnerves Littlefinger, which there are a lot of those situations now for Littlefinger. He's very he's not a happy camper in Winterfell.
Oh, one of the things that a lot of people didn't pick up on because they were busy proclaiming that Jon Snow and Sir Davos were the ones who actually were in the cave drawing all the paintings to get Daenerys to ride her dragon was the conversation that Dany and Jon had there was eerily similar to the conversation that Jon had the first time he met Mance Rayder, and then subsequently in prison when he's trying to get Mance to bend the knee, and he's having the conversation of, sure, you can stand up and be a hero for your men and they'll sing songs of you, but how long will those songs last until the White Walkers kill everyone? So do you swallow your pride in a moment like this because it's the best thing for your people? That's essentially what Dany is saying to Jon, and Jon continues to want to be the hero. Is Jon really learned anything from things in the past?
It's interesting because you've got a dichotomy there where Mance was truly a prisoner at Castle Black. Jon asks, am I a prisoner here? And he's not. He's free to, move about. I mean, he can't get to his ship, but for the most part, it's a very different scenario. He's not going to be executed. But both of these men, they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They've got their people who will judge them, who they have to stand up for and look out for. They're responsible for these people. And at the same time, each is being offered a fairly sweet deal by the person who is offering it. In the case of Daenerys, she is offering, yes, I will fight with you. I will bring my dragons. I will give you my army. We'll do all these things together, but you have to bend the knee. It's just a symbol. It's just but it's what it means to your people, the responsibility you have to them. Mance Rayder, I think that's a great observation, Rogers, in the same situation as Jon.
The other thing, that I was not the only one to notice this, but the fact that every time that there's a bow and an arrow involved and someone's shooting at it, as someone else said, the other person, the victim, continues to run in a straight line.
On one hand, I see that and I go, look, when I was watching Battle of the Bastards, I go, why is this kid running in a straight line? In this scene, I'm like, why is she flying directly at the only thing in the world that can hurt this dragon? When they missed with that first bolt, I was like, just get the fuck out of there. What are you thinking? Like, I was mad at her. Again, you and I, big dragon lovers, I was mad at her for putting her dragon in danger.
And then lastly, and I think this speaks to the intelligence of the show, to effectively always tell the audience or remind the audience of characters in a manner that makes sense to the story without it feeling forced. And that's when Arya returns back into Winterfell.
There's the concept of object permanence, and it's something that sets humans apart from other creatures, but it's an interesting psychological trick where in object permanence, and I experienced it recently, I finally got home security and I've got cameras in the house now, and I was away and I looked at my living room while I was away in a live stream and I went, holy shit, it still exists when I'm not there. And it's eerie. Like, your house is still there when you're not there, just doing nothing. On TV, it's very easy to lose that object permanence, the idea that something exists when you're not there. Characters often in television shows, they seem to know everything that's going on because the writers know everything going on. It takes a lot of discipline to remind yourself that Arya, she would still have reason to believe that Sir Roderick is still there, that Maester Luwin is still there, right? That she has no knowledge that they wouldn't be. And so it's a bit heartbreaking, her return to Winterfell. But again, callbacks to the ghosts that are still there, is still haunting her, still haunting the Starks. This whole house, I mean, this is a haunted castle, basically, at this point.
Our Twitter feed was blowing up on Sunday with people proclaiming that this was one of the best episodes that they've ever seen in the 7 seasons. Some claiming it was the best, and I think that continues to happen every episode of season 7, where people say, oh, this is the best one. Oh, no, wait a minute, this is the best one. But it truly has, I think, achieved a 9.9 on IMDb. But those same people are also feel cheated because they got what was the shortest episode of the season.
I did not feel cheated at all. I thought they packed a lot into those 50 minutes. Big D and I talked about the fact that this episode had a little bit of everything for everyone. There were reveals, there were questions, answers, questions posed, there were emotional reunions, you had fierce battle. You cannot ask a TV show to deliver more. And honestly, how else could you end it? Do you want 5 more minutes of Jaime sinking in the water?
Well, I think this speaks to Big D's conversation, or I think, what does he call it? The efficiency of narrative, where you remove unnecessary bits to get to the good ones, right? Like, you skip Star Wars episodes 1, 2, and 3, and you just start at Rogue One. You don't need all the backstory. You just want to see Darth Vader kicking ass, right? That's how you want to remember him. But there are others that are in the camp that say, well, this extra 10 minutes, they could have maybe added some things such as an explanation of why they found the cave paintings in the Cave of Convenience.
Yeah, or answer the question, why the fuck have they not started mining it?
Yeah, well, we were about to mine it, and then we realized we didn't have the budget for all the extras that we'd have to put in the scene.
I'd like to point out that I thought episode 3 was fine in Star Wars. I really enjoyed that one.
Ugh,
I think this is the 3rd time we've talked about how much I like this. Look, it takes a lot for me to admit that I like any of the Star Wars movies, and I really liked episode 3.
We just witnessed an effective use of a battle scene lasting 20 minutes. I don't need 45 minutes of Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi jumping from platform to platform, but I had to do some research on this. And what I found was this is not the only episode that has been 50 minutes. According to HBO's website, there's actually been one more episode that's just 50 minutes long, and that was The Red Woman, which was the season 6 premiere. And there's actually a handful of episodes that are only 51 minutes, including season 2's Garden of Bones, season 4's Laws of Gods and Men, The Watchers on the Wall, season 5's Sons of the Harpy, and season 6's The Broken Men. So while this seems like it's the shortest episode, I think it more has to do with the fact that it was so incredible that people looked at their watches and they were like, wow, it's over already.
I was surprised when the credits came up because I was, you get accustomed to a 1 hour block, and when it doesn't happen, your body and your mind can't quite adjust to it. I thought that something else was going to come after it. I honestly did think that maybe there was going to be something that came after their credits or something. I kept watching all the way until they rolled into, the HBO promos for Comic-Con and showed what went down at Comic-Con, which, by the way, I know you said there was a super long line for that, but man, that Game of Thrones experience looked amazing.
It looked dope. I'm not going to lie. Unfortunately, here's the thing about San Diego Comic-Con. And if there's any veterans out there that have a system that they want to share with us, please do. Because you and I have both been to Phoenix Comic-Cons. We've been to other Comic-Cons in our life. But there's one thing you and I won't do. And that's wait in lines that are going to detract from us having fun. Like, there's a diminishing return of value waiting in lines. Would you agree?
Yeah, the King Bee took me to my first San Diego Comic-Con, and that was, I think 2000. I was still living in Arizona the first time around, so I mean, I was a kid. And, we had a great time, but it's a different world now. You mentioned the veterans. Most of the people I know who used to go to Comic-Con just refuse to go anymore in San Diego because it's become such a carnival that it's like you can't do anything. And so it really is, like you mentioned, even Phoenix, the best times that we had in Phoenix was grabbing beers, at the con, people watching and just meeting people. It was much more, enjoyable. But there's always going to be the one or two things that are huge there, and you're going to be waiting in line forever. It's like Disneyland on steroids.
There are two things I really wanted to do, and those are the Game of Thrones and the Westworld experience. The Westworld experience would have been amazing, but you had to be in line on Thursday to get in on Sunday. And it just wasn't going to happen. But have no fear, Game of Thrones fans. By apology of some of these short episodes, other episodes in the season are all overly long, particularly the final two. Dragonstone and Stormborn, the first two episodes clocked in at 59 minutes. The Queen's Justice, last Sunday's episode, was 63 minutes. The fifth is 59 minutes as well, while the final two episodes will be 71 and 81 minutes respectively. So we're going to get back our Game of Thrones time.
It's like a book. I mean, if you think of it from that perspective, if you're reading a novel and you go, oh, well, why was it only 273 pages? I was really looking for 300. I mean, they said what they wanted to say, and who are we to judge the art, except for a podcast that constantly judges the art?
One of the things we did on the Westworld podcast is we always opened up the podcast kind of analyzing the title, and the titles for the first couple episodes here of season 7 in Game of Thrones have been pretty straightforward. This one, though, The Spoils of War, seems to have a hidden meaning. What did you think? Obviously, Spoils of War means the price of victory after a conquest, but it seems as if there's a deeper meaning, and that's what the writers were trying to go for.
Well, I think that the initial meaning, the way I took it upon first view was the spoils of war is what is gained from the war, and in this case, it was the harvest, the gold that all was being returned to King's Landing. And I think that's the superficial message they were trying to convey.
For as action-packed as an episode of Game of Thrones is, there's still a very rich level of character development that I think goes on here. And according to Heavy.com, an article that was written there, I tended to agree with this. And the author writes that, in his opinion, spoils aren't necessarily riches and glory, but it's all about damage, loss, and, how people are dealing with that. When you look at Littlefinger trying to make himself relevant again with Bran by introducing the cat's paw dagger and trying to do what Littlefinger is doing and then being shot down. Dany trying to prove she can live up to the name of Mother of Dragons by changing her strategy and going against her small council Tyrion's advice. Sansa, Arya trying to understand what being a Stark means in their current predicament. They haven't seen each other. They don't really know each other. Sansa kind of blows off Arya's comment that she built a list that she's going to kill people, and then she sees what she could do in a sparring battle with Brienne and realizes that there's truly a lot going on. And then when Bran, does his weird, creepy thing of confirming that she has the lists, Sansa kind of thinks to herself, wow, maybe there's something to being a Stark again, and reclaim a little bit of the humanity that they've lost. And I really like that idea as it pertains to the title of the episode.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind it if they took an extra 10 minutes to really focus on just what these people are going through. And I think that's something that was, if we want to talk about anything that was missing from the episode or something that I really love from other episodes of Game of Thrones that I hold in high esteem, it's the idea that they focus very acutely on the emotional shifts going on in people. And I feel like, the bigger the episode gets, the less focus there is there. But it's a great observation. I really wish they would have explored that a little more deeply. But I'm glad that it was pointed out. It gives me a little better understanding of the episode.
Talking about that emotional response, I picked up on it when Jon Snow first arrived in Dragonstone and met with Dany, that there seemed to be a little bit of sexual tension. The listeners wrote in and said that they didn't see it, but it seemed to have been confirmed this episode that the spoil of war could possibly be a love between Jon and Dany. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know if it was sexual tension. I think everything for you is sexual tension, but I think
she has a great heart.
Yeah, you weren't looking at her heart. Look, this is Game of Thrones. This is not, a fairy tale. This is not The Princess Bride. So there will be a price to pay for every victory. Again, a spoiler of war. I think that there is no way that these two will have a happy ending together, and I'm not sure that anybody wants to see that.
For this being a fantasy show, and guys, again, this is a show about dragons. It's a giant soap opera. The audience seems to be split on this. Are we on incest overload? Why do you think the audience isn't responding to a Jon and Daenerys relationship?
Honestly, I think that people wanted to see it coming. They were like, these two characters, their arcs are going to lead them toward each other. There's so much similarity. They're so powerful. They came from nothing and became something, all that, all the tropes that you're accustomed to. But I think a lot of people wanted to see it happen. And as soon as you see the two of them in the room together, it feels unnatural. And I hope that's what the show was trying to convey, was that just because two people seem made for each other, that when you do actually put them, and I think we've all experienced that in life, when you meet somebody and you think that that's going to be a perfect match, and then it ends up being they just don't fit together. And I hope that they don't force it any further, because honestly, if HBO thinks that millions of people want to see Daenerys and Jon sealing their victory with a kiss and holding hands on the throne, I think they're sadly mistaken. That's not the audience that you've attracted over 7 years, But at the same time, I could see where, and I mentioned it on the Instacast, where the two of them joining forces and maybe even marrying could, from a power and strength perspective, could be a very good thing.
What would make you angry more? Seeing Jon Snow ride a dragon, or seeing Jon Snow ride on the back of Daenerys' dragon with Daenerys as they fly away towards the sunset?
Now, is he attacking anything with a sword while he's on the back of the dragon?
He is.
Man, I mean, I'd like to see, first of all, the dragons don't seem like they're great flyers to begin with, so I wouldn't want to put any more weight on their backs. They're not the most aerodynamic beasts in the world. I think Jon could get his own. I'd rather see him with his own dragon.
Okay. All right. That's fair. Well, you talking about the big dragon battle that we saw here. You were very vocal on Twitter today, saying that you didn't find it that exciting, and you were talking and texting Big D and I about how you had this grand theory, and you were going to prove us all wrong. Court is now in session. Prove us wrong, Gene, and tell us why the Battle of the Burninator, or the Blackwater Rush, was not as good as some of the other ones we've seen.
So all I saw on social media Sunday night, Monday morning was dragons, yeah, fire, yeah, that was awesome, best episode ever, greatest battle ever. This is the greatest 20 minutes of TV. Look, I think everyone needs to get a hold of themselves. As you mentioned, every episode seems to be the best episode ever. And I don't want to put down the Battle of the Burninator. I don't want to say that this dragon attack in open field, I thought it was beautifully set up. I thought it made perfect sense tactically. I thought that the reactions were very reasonable. Big D and I talked about on the Instacast how you've got two armies from two different continents, two different cultures, never seen each other, and they're clashing right there on a field, and you see the results of that. All that's wonderful, but it's not the best we've seen, and here's why. So I'm going to try to keep this brief, but I've got a list of 3 superior battles in Game of Thrones and 1 honorable mention. And so first I want to start with Blackwater. Let's not forget how Blackwater was set up. It's the events surrounding the battle that play into the battle as well. Cersei, she gets poison in case King's Landing should fall. It's that serious. And that fills you with that dread, that wondering, will it fall? This is the real deal. You've got a hatred for Joffrey, knowing that he's a real piece of shit, but at the same time, his enemy, there's no good and evil here. Stannis is not quite good either. He's attacking. Who do you want to win? Who cares? You don't want either of them to win. But the point is, this is the world we're thrust into, Game of Thrones, where it's not necessarily a good guy, bad guy. Whereas on the flip side, we're rooting for a dragon to burn soldiers alive because they're apparently the bad guy. Apparently the Ed Sheeran scene did not give us enough love for the Lannister soldiers, if that's what they were trying to do. You've got Cersei freaking out Sansa, talking about how she's going to be raped if the city is taken at Blackwater. Then, of course, the incredible explosion of wildfire, the whole setup with the ship going out there alone. You've got the Hound, this character that's this big beast of a man, deserting because he's afraid of fire, playing into his character, a realistic reaction to what's going on around him. And then, of course, you have the surprise attack from the tunnels, beautifully choreographed. Tyrion is nearly killed. Podrick saves his life. And then, of course, you get to see Tywin show up with the cavalry. It is just an outstandingly choreographed, outstandingly set up scene, beautifully executed. From there, I would go one better. I would say Hardhome. Starts out with Tormund killing the Lord of Bones. It's a very tense moment. Then Jon gives that speech to the wildlings and has to admit to them that he's the one who killed Mance Rayder. And you can feel that clock ticking because you know he's got to convince them as quickly as possible, yet still be diplomatic. And yet you know that the Whites are going to come attack. And so it's this race against the clock. The Whites, of course, attack while the ships are loaded. It's absolute chaos. Wildlings are fighting over boats, again, reacting realistically to the situation as the walkers. We could see the walkers up there observing on horseback, the eerie silence. You see Longclaw in action, just, ripping up the enemy. Then the walls collapse. The Night's King does his come at me, bro hands, raises the dead, iconic moment. And then you see Carsey, the brave wildling leader who was an ally just moments before. It really hits home that anybody who was your friend could be turned into a white just like that. And of course, members of the band Mastodon were in the scene. Again, payback for Ed Sheeran. But of course, my favorite battle in this entire thing, Battle of the Bastards. You've got the tensions and the preparations, that debate between Jon and Sansa. You've got Rickon's life on the line, even though he refuses to run Serpentine. You've got that silent sprint across the field, Ramsay's sadism with the arrows, playing with him, toying with the whole situation, and Jon watching in horror as his brother dies as he's riding to save him. You have Davos's commentary from the background saying, "Oh, fuck it, let's go. We got to follow our leader, even though this is a stupid tactical move." Jon is wounded and he's on the ground, single sword, drops his belt. He gets against that charging Bolton cavalry. And then that wall of corpses starts to pile up. Bolton, surround them. They've got the spears out, shields up like a phalanx. 1-1, fighting desperately to fight back. He's confused and bewildered. They're buried in bodies. The Knights of the Vale come in. They save the day. There's that chase back to Winterfell. Ramsay, in that final act of cruelty, puts the arrow through one's eye. And finally, Jon just beating the ever-loving fuck out of his face. It was so satisfying. I cannot see how somebody thinking dragons flying around burning things and a giant crossbow in any way, compares to this. And from an emotional perspective, I want to go as an honorable mention to the Red Wedding, where you have, starting out with Robb Stark's wife repeatedly stabbed in the stomach, baby killed in her as she is murdered, Robb shot by crossbows, the Bannermen are massacred, the direwolf getting killed, and then Arya having to witness the massacre as a child, and finally Roose Bolton stabbing Robb in the heart, and then as Catelyn Stark takes Walter Frey's wife hostage and slits her throat, and then she herself is killed. And just that scream that Catelyn Stark lets out as she sees her entire life taken away from her, and then finally she is actually killed almost as an act of mercy at that point. I cannot see how anybody could think this stacks up against those moments.
Okay. All right. Listen, great arguments. I completely agree with your assessment that these are the battles and the scenes that we're going to remember, that these are the episodes that you love to watch again. But if I could, I'm going to counter. I'm going to cross-examine you and try to make an argument that I think this battle of the Burninator is better than those. Okay? Are you with me on this?
Gotcha.
Okay. All right. So let's all talk about the commonality between these. Is that there seems to be a major character death And I think first off, that may be the only reason that you think that they're better. And I'm not just saying you, Gene. I'm saying that there's a lot of people like you who are not satisfied with a battle in a show like Game of Thrones unless a major character dies. Now, seemingly, Jaime Lannister could be dead. But I mean, do you really think that they would have done a cliffhanger if he's not going to come back in the next episode? The fact that this battle, this great, huge melee of major tier A characters, and none of them died, seemingly, I think it is something different that we haven't seen before. And it put us on the edge of our seats. And there, added gravity to the situation because you were like, oh my God, is Jaime going to die? No, wait a minute. You kept shouting at your TV, no, Bronn, it can't be Bronn. And then, no, it's not Drogon. No, not Daenerys. No, not Jaime. You know what I mean? So there are all these people, but if they can get through an entire battle and no one dies, I think that there's something different that we haven't seen in an audience. And it's not just the same dinner that we've been served over and over and over again.
But that's like saying that, gosh, I hope this next war, no one gets killed in real life, right? In the sense that, their battles, like people do die. And it reminded me of, when you watch a Rambo movie and everybody's shooting at it. Oh, it was when we covered on Shut the Movies, when we did Commando, remember Commando?
Yeah.
And you've got 40, 50 guys shooting at Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yet nobody can hit him. That was the same thing. It felt like those scenes where there's automatic weapons and everybody's shooting at each other. And yet somehow nobody you actually care about dies. The deaths are coming by the dozens. Men with shields and swords and spears and horses, and everybody's just dying left and right. But somehow, amazingly, Jaime, Bronn, Randall, I think Randall was still there, right? Daenerys, they all survive. Dickon survives. Everybody's fine. It didn't sit right with me in the sense that it's not like I need a sacrifice to be satisfied, but rather that it didn't feel serious. Like, were you actually worried that anybody other than Drogon, were you actually worried that anybody was going to get killed?
I was, absolutely. And I think this goes to this is a testament to the directing in the battle scene, which is like the anti-Michael Bay, right? Everything was done from following a character very similar to what they did in Battle of the Bastards. It effectively used slow motion in parts to accentuate the battle. It used a steady cam only when absolutely needed. Plus, we received fantastic overhead shots of the battle, like Battle of the Bastards. So the audience, when we're watching this expansive, large battle scene, we understand what's happening, right? You go to see any Transformers movie or any Michael Bay movie, right? There's an unnecessary obstacle that, a protagonist has to overcome. Like in this particular instance, like there'd be a group of bicyclists going, through King's Landing at the same time that the loot train was going through, right? And the Drogon would have to avoid the bicyclists. So that's like the Michael Bay shit. This was, you thought, oh shit, Bronn, he first as he's going head on with that Dothraki, he throws his thing, and that's just skill from Bronn being a badass, right? You talk about those callbacks. Every time we've seen Bronn in a fight, think back to the trial of Tyrion. He basically outwits his opponent, but he's bested by this Dothraki. This is a real moment where Bronn could die because he just had, a good moment with Jaime. There was a kind of a bromance that was happening, and you really felt for a character. And I think Bronn is one of those characters where the audience connects with them, even though he's a tier, he'd probably be a B tier character. He's like a Hodor where he's a fan favorite and you don't want him to die. But there were very real moments where not only Bronn, but Jaime, Dany, Drogon were all in real danger. And I think for that to come across as effective, other shows try to do this. The Walking Dead tries to do this, and it's been failing miserably for The Walking Dead because they don't kill any tier A characters. So I don't know what you think about that, but I think Game of Thrones, as we're leading up here, we, the audience, either need to realize and come to grips with some of our favorite characters are going to die. Otherwise, this show might jump the dragon.
I still feel that realistically, someone, maybe everyone, would have died in this scenario. It seems unlikely that the body count would be that high, but no high-ranking person really dies. But that gets me to another point where I will agree with you, and I think that people need to, if you're going to complain about this, you can complain about the show from an artistic perspective, you can complain about the show from a logical perspective, but one of the things that's really bothering me is people are complaining about why didn't she's, with Daenerys, why didn't she fly in at a different angle, go from on top, because then you could hit him and he'd be vulnerable. Again, why didn't she fly in a serpentine fashion? And one of the things that really blew my mind is people talking about the physics of it. A dragon really couldn't fly that way, or her hair should have moved more, or how is she keeping her grip on the dragon in that scenario? And that's the thing is, if you're preoccupied with that minutia, you're really not embracing the show as it is. It's like we said before, it's a dragon. Like, you've got to believe that there are some parts of it, and then there was the debate online today on Reddit about whether they should start armoring the dragons. If she were to armor the dragons, then they wouldn't be susceptible to that sort of attack. And then which people said, well, you can't put armor on a dragon because then the dragon gets too heavy. And and I'm like, guys, why are you talking about that? When the fact of the matter is that, think about it from the flip side. This show has done such an amazing job with these creatures that don't even freaking exist. We've watched them grow from these, little eggs into the size of a freaking, Boeing jet. And the thing is, we care more about the dragons than we do about any humans on the screen. That's an incredible accomplishment.
Well, yeah, I mean, people were being burned alive, people were being stabbed, their throats being slit, a Dothraki was fucking speared through the heart, and all I kept thinking was, please don't kill Drogon. Please don't kill Drogon.
Yeah, when Drogon's hit and that shriek comes out, I wasn't even thinking, it didn't even occur to me for a moment to think that Daenerys might die. I was like, oh God, they hurt him. How dare they?
One of the topics that I floated on Twitter was whether or not the spears, the tip of the spears, might be poisoned. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love that idea. You pointed out that the device is called Scorpion, and it's not just a cool name. That there might be that possibility. And another thing is, with all these deaths that we think should have happened, there is a possibility that these characters, it's like plucking a ripe fruit, right? We may not have enough feeling for Dickon yet, or we haven't seen Jaime in his final form, the way that we're supposed to, the impression we're supposed to be left with of him. And so all that tells me is that if they are being kept alive, there is some development to those characters yet. At least I hope so. Somebody pointed out, I forgot who it was, pointed out that essentially at the rate they're going, Game of Thrones can just end next episode. We'd be done with it. And no, there's a lot to come. If we think that the way people are right now in this world is the way that they're going to end up, you're sadly mistaken. People are going to change drastically in the next, what do we have left here? 9 episodes.
If you watch at the end of HBO, and this is why you should subscribe to HBO, because you won't get this when you pirate, is they have interviews where they go behind the scenes and they talk to the showrunners and they talk to the artists and the producers. And there really is a high level of skill and appreciation for trying to get the physics of a mythical creature like a dragon to appear real to an audience. And they survey military jets, and they imagine what it would be like flying across. And of course, this is an entire generation who watched How to Train Your Dragon and How to Train Your Dragon 2. So we have source material that we can pull from, which I think is why you have so many dragon experts upset on Reddit.
The notion of art cannot be lost in this, and it is tempting to do so, but I think that and it sounds ironic coming from a podcast where we talk about these things ad nauseum, but sometimes you really do just have to appreciate the art in front of you, and look at it from a perspective of what have they created on the screen for you. Does it resonate with you? Are you feeling anything about this? And stop looking at it as like, what would be the smart thing to do in this situation? Maybe, I think we've established that Daenerys is not the smartest, neither is Jon Snow. And the smartest character you do see in this situation is Tyrion standing on the hill, and he's absolutely saying the right thing. Jaime should have gotten the fuck out of there, but Jaime's not a smart guy either.
Talk about that satisfaction that the audience received, during some of the other battles. I think you mentioned, Hardhome and Battle of the Bastards and Blackwater, when there are certain moments where the Knights of the Vale save the day, or Tywin arrives with a cavalry, or shoot when the Night's King puts his hands up and he's like, come at me, bro. And you're like, holy shit, now I'm seeing, there's satisfaction in seeing all these fucking ice zombies that we've been waiting for. We've been waiting 7 seasons, Gene, for a fucking dragon to lay waste to people, and we finally got to see it. Like, I've watched this episode 3 times, each viewing with different audiences, and the first time Drogon fucking shoots that lake of fire, that stream, that river of fire out of his mouth, I get the same reaction almost all the time, where people like audibly scream in just sheer like excitement that they're seeing dragons fucking lay waste. This is better than any like DC movie. This is better than Wonder Woman. This is better than Superman versus Batman. Better than Spider-Man: Homecoming. The effects of that dragon just laying waste to people was amazing.
The part of the battle that I liked the best actually was the realness of Bran running for his life. That was beautifully executed, in the sense that you see this guy who's normally composed, who's normally a threat, and he's running unarmed through all the carnage, bumping off of things, scrabbling for his life, and he's genuinely afraid for his life. Maybe Big D's right. There is something for everybody. I don't give 2 shits about a dragon breathing fire, and I give a lot of shits about a guy running scared. So that's just me.
Okay. The one thing I will say though, is I am not a huge fan of cliffhangers. I think they're a cheap way to mess around with your fans, with the audience. It's again very soap opera-y, and it's a trope that's been overused. And Game of Thrones, I thought, was one of those shows that didn't insult its audience by using cheap tropes. If they're going to kill a character, even a main character, one like a Robb Stark or a Catelyn Stark, they're going to do it on screen, and they're not going to leave you waiting for next episode like other similar series do. Did you think that they took a step backwards by doing, by leaving it open of whether or not Jaime lives or dies?
Roger, they could have done a lot worse. They could have had Jaime charging at her and then stop it right there. What happens next week? Join us on Game of Thrones. But the thing is it never occurred to me until right now when you just mentioned it. What if we just don't see him again for the rest of the season?
Yeah.
What happened to Jaime? And then he shows up. It's like on a soap opera, like Days of Our Lives, where his face was changed. They got another actor.
That's
whatever.
Right. That's right.
Please, Game of Thrones, please don't. I know you've already filmed it, but please don't do that.
Well, okay. So, did I convince you to move up this battle at all in your rankings?
No, absolutely not. It's volumes better than what we saw earlier this season. I think somebody on Twitter said it the best. They said, we'll admit this isn't the greatest battle in Game of Thrones, but it's the greatest television you've seen in the last 6 months. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's like my sex life. I mean, this may not be the best sex, but it's the best sex I've received in the last 6 months. The only
received.
Well, I know we joked about, what happened if Jaime Lannister never showed up, or if he did, he showed up and he's a different character. He's got dark hair. But does Game of Thrones have a death problem? I asked this question to a couple friends, and they had mentioned that, well, why? No, of course, they're killing characters off left or right. And I said, no, I mean, I get that. The killing of characters has never been the show's problem, because the show has had so many characters, so many side characters that you've liked, but then when they're gone, you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that character. But now they're down to like their main characters. And do you think we're going to see more episodes like this where they don't know who to kill?
I don't think so. I think that we're going to see what we've seen in the trend actually recently is when we saw it with the Sept of Baelor is that the deaths are going to come in clumps. And that makes a lot of sense. Usually when there's a killing, you don't kill just one person. It's multiple people. It's a target with collateral damage. And I thought that was one of the really brilliant parts about season 6, episode 10, The Winds of Winter, was that there were people who just happened to be in the building who did not deserve to die. I mean, main characters who'd really done not much wrong, and they died because they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I think that Game of Thrones, it's again how quickly we forget. That was episode 10 of season 6. We're now at episode 4 of season 7, and we had Lady Olenna, who I would argue is one of the more charming. Just like when Maester Luwin died, that was a really cool character. And I think that we have amnesia when it comes to these deaths, where it's only been one episode. And I don't want it to be confused between me saying, look, I really think that when they went down there and tortured Ilaria and Tyene, that one of them should have been killed right there, and this battle didn't have any major deaths. I wouldn't say that I'm complaining that not enough people are dying here, but rather that scenarios aren't playing out in a fashion that I think is true to the nature of Game of Thrones. Do you think that they need to kill somebody off soon?
Well, I mean, think about who was the last character that you genuinely got upset that died? The last character, and be honest.
I talked to people about Lady Olenna, and they were like, "Well, she was old." I'm like,
yeah,
guys,
exactly.
This isn't Alzheimer's, man. Like, this is fucking. She got poisoned. But yeah, I think for me, it'd be, honestly, for me, it'd probably be Hodor or the Three-Eyed Raven.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for most people, and myself included, it is Hodor. Lady Olenna, I don't think people are that upset because she went out like a fucking boss. You know what I mean? Like, it was true to her character. It was a self-satisfying death to where no one is upset. Hodor was one of those characters, and there's not many on this show that are just innocent and pure, and without being weird. Hodor was one of them, and the other one is Samwell Tarly. Those are the two main pure innocent characters. Would you agree?
I would argue that Grey Worm as well, even though he's a killer, I don't think he kills for any pleasure. But yeah, I think that I know when they brought Jon Snow back and people were like, "Oh, thank God, like Jon Snow, he can't die, whatever." Hodor, honestly, if they brought him back somehow, I would not be mad about it. I'd just be like, "All right, cool." That you don't even have to explain it. So Hodor actually escaped. Whenever he
even using a character like Grey Worm. Grey Worm's he's a warrior. If he goes down in battle, he's going to go down. His death scene is going to be great. Could you imagine if we see a White Walker Hodor?
What if he was equally just not threatening? He just kind of followed all the other ones, helped them, carried some around that didn't have legs and stuff.
Yeah,
but also, kids, do not hug polar bears.
Yeah, no, do not.
Very dangerous.
Well, so you don't think the producers have an issue with which character they can kill off now without the fans revolting?
I would say they do, except for I guarantee you that in the next 3 episodes, some shit is going down.
Okay, so who do you think's on Death Watch then?
Oh, I think Littlefinger for sure, absolutely. But again, would people be mad about it?
I would.
You'd be mad if Littlefinger were killed?
I think I would, because so you put on Twitter, and this is one of the next topics that we have, that you honestly believe that Peter Baelish, Littlefinger, is the Severus Snape of Westeros.
I said that I feel like they're setting him up that way. And the reason why is, first of all, every scene he's in, he doesn't look directly at people. It's all side-eye now. His hushed tone is becoming even more hushed. And that's getting a little, if you look at his actual, what he's saying to people, it's really not that bad. He's like, "I loved your mother. I love your sister.
I'll always protect you.
Yeah, I'll always protect you. I brought your father's bones back here to rest." And
everything I did it for your mother.
Exactly. And so now you're starting to sound like the Galactic Trade Federation.
That's right.
That's getting a little weird.
Oh,
but you know what I'm saying is that I think that, again, I'm not saying that's necessarily his actual character, but rather that I feel like Game of Thrones as a television show might actually be trying to play that. I can't call it a trope because it's a relatively new phenomenon with Snape, but this idea that his love for Kat drove him, or the way he was warped by an inability to have her, drove him to some mutated sense of duty to the Starks.
So I went back and I was trying to think of, is there an argument for Littlefinger being the Snape of Westeros? But the more I dug back into the history, it does seem as if, starting off just with the cat's paw dagger, Littlefinger may be the one behind that, although all my research has shown that we still don't know who's the one that went after Bran.
Yeah, I mean, the assassin is never really truly shown who paid off the assassin. It's been settled that people have surmised that it's Joffrey who did it, but there's never actual proof. It's just kind of decided that it was Joffrey, but there's no, you don't see him exchange money with anybody. There's no conversation between him and anybody that would imply that that he did it, where he's taking responsibility for it. And Joffrey seems like the kind of character who would not give a fuck about taking responsibility for that sort of thing.
Well, isn't it in the books that it's hinted at that Joffrey saw his father? He wanted to prove to his father that he was a man by killing.
Yeah, and also in the show, I think Tyrion and Jaime kind of decide that, yeah, it was probably him.
If Littlefinger wasn't behind the cat's paw assassin, and all he did was kill Jon Arryn, how was Littlefinger responsible for the War of the Five Kingdoms, which is what he suggests to Bran?
Okay, so Jon Arryn, even though Littlefinger didn't kill him himself, he convinced Lysa Arryn to to poison her husband being the hand of the king, which leaves a vacancy there. Then with the attempt on Bran's life, that causes Cat to kidnap Tyrion. In essence, it puts the Starks and the Lannisters at odds with each other, while a Stark is also being summoned to King's Landing. So it kind of puts the wheels in motion.
So you think he killed Jon Arryn, knowing that Baratheon would then send for his friend Ed Stark, and then Littlefinger could move in on Catelyn?
Yeah, I mean, that's not my thinking per se. That's the prevalent mapping of incidents that took place. So it's not. It's
okay.
Pretty dark. Yeah.
So ever since that time that's happened, has Littlefinger ever betrayed the Starks?
Well, I think you see him at Harrenhal before the Red Wedding. Some people would argue that he used Sansa in marrying her to Ramsay Bolton. Was obviously he knew what was happened to her, that it was a political move by Littlefinger. But, again, I think that any of these could be explained away in the opposite direction, that maybe he thought that by accelerating a clash between the Starks and Lannisters, he would show people who their true enemies were. By marrying Sansa off, that was the best move for her. Look, it worked out for her in the end. And, does the end justify the means? I don't think so. Sending someone to be sexually abused and tortured with a psychopath, is not exactly, I don't think there's any price or any gift that you can gain that would be worth that price. So it's hard to say.
In the first couple of seasons, when Ned Stark is doing the research that Jon Arryn had left behind, where he was, researching the validity of the Baratheon children, and was coming to the conclusion that it was actually Cersei and Jaime. Cersei and Jaime Lannister were scared that Arryn and Stark were going to come across this. Do you think by chance Littlefinger was employed by the Lannisters to shut down Bran Stark, and then also shut down Arryn and Ned?
I think it would be, now you're talking about the cat's paw boomerang, right? That he somehow sent this blade out to kill a boy, and then that blade somehow made its way back to him. Right. From the boy's mother, right? It seems, unlikely. Now, remember, the way that Littlefinger reobtained Cat's Paw Dagger is that during Ned's arrest, it was then, transferred into his possession. So it wasn't directly handed to him by Cat Stark, but there's lots of theories that could float around there. I think that they've shown us the dagger enough times on the show where we can only assume that it's going to come into big play. Now, currently, it's in Arya's hands, and hopefully it stays there.
Well, Littlefinger has two major scenes. The first one is which he's talking to Bran, and he actually hands him the cat's paw dagger. And the other one is when he's looking down on Arya Stark. I'll start with Arya because I think the Bran Stark is going to have more of a conversation. But what was that look that Arya gave Littlefinger, after her spat with Brienne?
So when I watched it, the way I saw it was, look, Arya doesn't reveal her identity or her abilities unless she has to, right? Stealth is her friend, and she would not want anybody to know what she can do unless there was a purpose for it. Beyond that, you can't think that sparring with Brienne of Tarth is high on her list of to-dos today. It's not exactly. She has some fun with it, sure, but there's got to be some other reason. She doesn't need the practice, clearly. I think it comes down to she wanted Littlefinger to know what she's capable of, and I believe that she's scheming against him. Whether this is to draw him out, to get him to try to manipulate her, in which case she can catch him red-handed, or if it's a sort of situation where she wants to intimidate him or make him uncomfortable. Either way, I think she's playing a psychological game with Littlefinger.
Do you think that she might be the one to kill him?
Oh, I think that's a definite possibility, but I think the poetic solution would be that somehow Sansa kills him or has him killed.
The other scene that he has with Bran lit up social media. You talk about that callback to prior seasons. This is where a lot of people have hypothesized that Bran will use his powers to investigate the cat's paw dagger and uncover Littlefinger for what he is. They say this because at the end of their conversation, Bran says a line that Littlefinger has used in the past, which is "chaos is a ladder." Now, a lot of people that I've watched the show with have asked, what is the meaning behind that phrase, "chaos is a ladder"?
Now, the way I took it is it was a callback again to that scene, the discussion between Varys and Littlefinger, in which they are debating the nature of chaos and more importantly, the nature of the individual. But I didn't really go much deeper than that. I just thought it was Bran sort of trickling out history.
Yeah, so I did some research. So on Reddit, there's a user, Reduced to Rubble, and he actually had a really great explanation of the phrase Chaos the Ladder, and it came from that previous interaction from that season where Varys and Littlefinger are having that conversation. The long version of this is Varys says that he does what he does for the good of the realm. Littlefinger says that the realm is a lie and there's only the individual. Varys says that without a national identity, the people will be thrown into chaos. He compared it to a pit that swallows us all, oblivion that you cannot escape from. Whereas Littlefinger says that chaos isn't a pit, it's a ladder. It contradicts Varys by saying that instead of chaos being something you're trapped in, it's something that you use to get out of the pit. It's a way to reach heights that you have not reached before. Littlefinger sets up a dichotomy. While others thrive on order and structure, he thrives on chaos, and chaos is how Littlefinger advances in society. Now he goes on to explain how people try to climb the ladder or take advantage of opportunities not otherwise open to them, but they lack the political astuteness or cunning to do so safely. They fall, which is to say, they die. Essentially, Littlefinger is supporting a moral doctrine that everyone ought to be out for themselves. The only purpose in life is to gain power, and all other things, patriotism, love, religious faith, are all lies. Only the accumulation of power is real to Littlefinger, and that power can be accumulated through chaos by using upheaval to rearrange things so that you're on top. So obviously, if he believes and subscribes to this, by Bran saying the line back to him, chaos is a ladder, does that mean that Bran also believes this, or does that mean that Bran knows what Littlefinger is up to?
I think it means that Bran knows what Littlefinger's up to. And what's interesting about this entire setup, though, and it didn't really click for me until you brought all this up, is, we talked about the possibility of Varys being a traitor to Daenerys, and that he was playing sides off of each other and using, again, as Big D said, an agent of chaos to set this world to crumble, in which case the little man, the common man, can rise up to power or to overthrow the shackles of this monarchy in this Game of Thrones. Great idea, but now it sounds like from this discussion that Varys, if they're both being honest with each other, Varys and Littlefinger actually have absolutely opposite opinions of chaos, and Varys is actually averse to it, that he believes that there needs to be a national identity, that people need to bond together. As you said, without that, there's a pit that swallows all. It's a really interesting observation, and again, a brilliant callback that gives us a history of the positions of these two men. But to answer your question, yeah, I think that Bran is just letting him know that he knows.
If we were to see that the transfer of the Three-Eyed Raven happened last season, which we think that it does, he's basically seen literally everything in the Seven Kingdoms, including Littlefinger describing his philosophy of manipulation at a time in which he was allied to evil Joffrey. He also presumably knows that Littlefinger played a role in his father's death and might have just placed him on Arya's kill list. So, listen, if based on the look that Littlefinger gave Bran, Littlefinger's scared, and I think he may be right. I think he may be the next major character to die, but what if all along the twist is he was acting in the Stark's best interest all along? He's in love with Catelyn. He's always been in love with Catelyn, and she's a Tully. So you have to imagine that he would have an affection for the children of the woman he loved, which he has admitted multiple times he does. So, the twist could be, he was just a guy that was trying to make his way in life. He was in love with someone, Kat, who was in love with Bran Stark, not even Ned Stark. And he fought him for, her heart. And he was not the strongest of guys and was taken to task by Bran. But, what does that do to a guy? How does that, he doesn't win through sheer power. He has to use his mind, which you kind of have to respect.
Kind of sounds a lot like a character from the Harry Potter series known as Severus Snape.
That's right.
Full circle.
Well, shifting from one Brandon Stark to another, and gosh, are there a lot in the Game of Thrones universe. Bran, the living Three-Eyed Raven Bran, I want to talk a little bit about his powers. Because when he's talking to Mira, and he kind of, unfortunately, that poor girl has drug him for miles through the snow. All of her family has died, and all she can get is a thank you from him. She says to him straight to his face, "You died in that cave." It got me to thinking, which superhero character does Bran most resemble? Is he more Aquaman, Or is he more Dr. Manhattan?
Well, as I believe Aquaman never went out into space just to be alone and think, I'm going to go with Doc Manhattan on this. Bran is, as they've now referred to him, as his emo Bran Stark. Like, he's out there just sitting under the tree, having feelings, having thoughts. So I think he's definitely a Dr. Manhattan character, kind of aware of everything that's going on around him, but just distant so much from humans, whereas Aquaman still has a distinct humanity.
Well, yeah, I mean, Bran, he does have the two distinct magical powers, right? Warging, which is what Aquaman does, which is control animals.
No, Aquaman talks to animals.
No, I think he controls them. He doesn't you can't talk to a fish.
No, well, he telepathically communicates with them, but they're still operating on their own free will.
I don't know about this. I think he's controlling to create like a Sharknado and throw it at people. Anyway, but he also seems to have the ability to just have visions of everything that happened in human history, which is very similar to what Dr. Manhattan had.
The green site is very Dr. Manhattan. Actually, that's a very good comparison because I think Aquaman could do for up to a minute, he can actually control an animal. And I think that there's a limit on how long Bran can do it as well when he wargs.
People have been talking about, well, it's emo Bran Stark and he's so strange. I think there was a meme out there that Sansa Stark's like, I finished my semester with my degree in political science and my two siblings came back and they joined cults. But I did some homework on this and I fell into a Reddit rabbit hole where I discovered that Bran isn't he's not purposely shoving people aside and not caring about their feelings. It's just that he has so much more important things that he has to worry about. We made fun of the fact that he said to Sansa that she looked so nice on the night of her rape by Ramsay Bolton, because that's the only small item that he can remember because he's got so many other things that he remembers now through time. And that's what's causing him to act this weird and be all creepy.
I'm not sure that it's accurate to say that he's got more important things to do. I don't think he gets to decide. I think that he's not Bran anymore. He has taken on the mantle of the Three-Eyed Raven. And so Bran had feelings, emotions, motivations, bias. If you're going to be the Three-Eyed Raven, you can't have any of that stuff. You just observe, you see. And so I think it's a parallel with Arya's journey in that, she went from no one to becoming Arya Stark again. Can Bran go from being the Three-Eyed Raven to being Bran again? And he seems pretty far gone.
Well, one of our listeners wrote in, Derek C., and he writes in, having finished the books a couple times, one thing that's worth noting is that Bran's behavior as he transitioned into this being or Third Eye Raven throughout the show, there's been a ton of signs that point to Bran basically being all of Brandon Starks throughout the time, meaning that he is Brandon the Builder and Brandon the Shipwright. The blood of the first men flows through him, and he's the cross between that and the Child of the Forest. He may not actually be the Night King, but he's the actual enemy to him. He was there in the beginning and helped defeat him before. Is this a possibility? What are your thoughts on this?
I like this idea, and we've seen it in a few emails before, at least parts of it. It does make sense that, people have drawn parallels between Bran and Bran the Builder, at least, in the sense that how does he know, they say in season 1 when he's kind of scampering about Winterfell, that they say he knows Winterfell better than anybody. It's almost like he knows where every brick was laid. And I think that might have been a tell as to the fact that there is some of Bran in Bran the Builder. And also if, Bran the Builder was the wall is attributed to him. And so in that sense, that very powerful link between Bran that people have, kind of illustrated in the wall, could also be evidence of that there's some sort of a continuity between the different Brandon Starks.
Would this put a hole in Big D's Bran is the Night King theory?
I don't think it puts a hole in it. It's just a different perspective that he could be the Night's King, or possibly he could be the antithesis thereof, which leads to the question, who is the Night's King, or is he literally just some dude?
Well, one thing that we do know is there are at least 8 distinct historical characters named Brandon Stark in the novels, though that stretch across thousands of years. Within the relatively recent history of House Stark, 2 important characters are named Brandon Stark, one of them being Ned Stark's older brother, Brandon, who fought Littlefinger, and of course was killed by the Mad King Aerys II. Bran the Builder, however, was that legendary member of the first men of the Age of the Heroes. He was the founder of House Stark, as you pointed out. Many famous structures are attributed to have been built under his direction, hence the name the Builder, including Winterfell, and most famously the Wall, which, according to legend, he raised with the Age of Giants. Now, Those would be pretty cool. And I could believe what Derek is writing here. But then you have guys like Brandon the Shipwright, who was named due to his love of the sea. He loved to sail across the sunset sea, but he was never seen again, and his body was never buried in the crypts. And then you have his son, Brandon the Burner, who got his name just because he burned his father's ships. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if I'm going to be all the Brandons of the Starks, I just want to be known for the famous ones. I don't need to be known for Brandon the Shipwright or his lesser known son. They got his name, not because he was a follower of a socialist Vermont senator.
There's also Brandon Peterson, who is a tax accountant at H&R Block. So, they're all special in their own ways.
Well, a topic that I actually didn't catch that you did that I think is really cool is this idea of the Golden Company. Now, what is the Golden Company?
A lot of people, miss this. And again, I can see amid all the fire and dragons and death and destruction that there were subtler scenes in this episode where they gave us a lot to chew on. And one of the things was, if you recall, Cersei's having the conversation with Tycho from the Iron Bank. And Tycho says that, they're paying the bank back in a lump sum. It's very unorthodox, and that they regret that they won't have interest payments from the Lannisters anymore, because everyone knows Lannisters always pay their debts. Cersei points out that they actually might need some help in the money department for future endeavors. And she kind of name drops the Golden Company. So, of course, my ears perk up. What's the Golden Company all about? She says she wants the Golden Company to help her recover some assets, perhaps. So if you go back in history, the Golden Company of Essos was founded by Aegor Rivers, called Bittersteel, who was a legitimized bastard of King Aegon IV Targaryen, who fled Westeros with the younger sons of Daemon I Blackfire. So this is at the end of the first Blackfire Rebellion. So again, if you go back that far, you see that this is a faction of sellswords that were founded by a Targaryen. In fact, they number roughly 10,000 men. They've got elephants, they've got archers, knights, foot soldiers, and so they are basically swords for hire. And Cersei would then raise them. Now, here's the interesting thing. Cersei has an army. She's got a navy, but these guys are very specialized. They are excellent at signing a contract and following that contract to the death. They're
like the Hessians.
They're like the Hessians. Even if we assume all that will come to fruition, the Golden Company will come into play. She will hire them. They will exert this force from Essos with 10,000 men and even elephants. The other part I don't get is Cersei says she wants something returned, something that could be missing from her. And I'm still trying to piece together what that something could be.
Well, we know she already has gold, right? And she knows she's going to use that as leverage to possibly enlist the Golden Company. But what else could she have returned to them? And then I started thinking of some of the promos that we saw for the season. And the one that stuck out at me is, we're the only Lannisters left. Well, any of the ones that matter. Could she be going after Tyrion, knowing that Tyrion is giving advice to Dany, or could it be something like Casterly Rock?
See, now I thought Casterly Rock was a good option because it's something that belongs to Lannisters. Rightly, she feels they should own it. The thing is you've got an army and you've just given up Casterly Rock, which you could have held with relatively few people. Is it really something that's important right now? Do you need it right now? I don't think so. And then it could have just been a turn of phrase that the entire kingdom belongs to her, but that seems a little vague. And so I've kind of got it thinking that either it is an item of extreme value, perhaps, one of the horns that's been alluded to previously in this season that can, control dragons or have other, magical abilities. But I agree with you that Tyrion seems to be something that she would want. It belongs to her in the sense that he belongs to her in the sense that he is family, and that he escaped her clutches, right? Jaime let him out. I wonder if she wants a specialized group just to go back, capture him, and bring him to her. She seemed to really, really enjoy getting the gift of Valyria and Tyene.
So do you think she wants to kill Tyrion, or she wants to bring him back into the fold?
Oh, I don't think she has any interest in bringing him back to the fold. I mean, she basically made Jaime swear that he would destroy Tyrion if he ever saw him, and I believe that she has no desire to reconcile with Tyrion.
Well, that brings me to my next topic, which is there could be a growing rift between Tyrion and Daenerys. Seeing Tyrion on the hill, looking down into the battle, seeing all the Lannister army being burned alive, his bannermen, the ones that he may have fought with at Blackwater years ago, and also his brother. You could tell that he still cared about those people, and the fact that Daenerys has maybe made moves to not take his advice may put Tyrion in a situation where he could possibly defect.
Yeah, I mean, you see Tyrion when he's standing on the hill with the Dothraki watching the battle, and then he's told your people can't fight. And you see that he feels that sympathy, as you mentioned. In addition, he feels alienated, and I think it's a moment where he realizes that he is not a Targaryen, he is not a Dothraki. He is very out of place among them when it is, in fact, his family that they're fighting against. But beyond that, you talk about Daenerys. She's in episode 4. She's laying a lot of blame at Tyrion's feet, and turns to Jon Snow for counsel, and that's got to really impact Tyrion and make him feel less confident in his position, and maybe wonder about what he is doing there.
Whose strategy should we believe in? Do you believe that Dany is overconfident? Obviously, we saw the effects that the dragons and the Dothraki have had. And this, again, you talk about callbacks. One thing that we didn't call back for was the Robert Baratheon's comment that you never want to face a Dothraki in an open field. And we finally saw that again in this episode. But was Dany's decision the right to attack? Meaning, did she accomplish what she was set out to accomplish? The gold still made it to King's Landing, so they'll still be able to pay the Iron Throne. They may be able to still hire the Golden Company and turn this around. We also saw that Dany became vulnerable in the eyes of her enemies. They saw the success of the Scorpion. So Tyrion, I think, was trying to avoid all of that. He didn't want Daenerys to be exposed. He didn't think it was a good idea. And so had he continued on with the strategy, it may have worked. Now they could be more exposed than ever.
I agree. I think that Jon Snow sees the wisdom in Tyrion's strategy as well. But beyond winning a battle, what Tyrion's trying to do is win a war in perpetuity, in the sense that he understands that. I mean, if there's any lesson to all this, is that, look, everybody sat on the throne for a matter of days. Robert, had it after a rebellion, and then it's just shifted from person to person, and it's just a never-ending cycle of Game of Thrones, and people die in the process. And I think Tyrion's saying, look, you could win back the Iron Throne right now if you wanted to attack. And Jon's agreeing with it too. But if you were to do the things you want to do, if you were to go in with dragons and burn the city down and all that, it's just a matter of time before somebody gets rid of you. And what they want to do is instead show the world that there is a alternative, a different type of leader, and that's the first step. Now, as for the attack, the Battle of the Burninator, the Battle of Blackwater Rush, I think that she did exactly what she needed to do, which was she took out the food stores. The hay is all destroyed. All the harvest is destroyed. It's not going to be able to feed her army, but it's also not going to be able to feed the opposition. I feel that she took out a great swath of the Lannister army and really kind of sent a message that is going to make a lot of other people, think twice before they want to go up against her.
Yeah, but don't you think it all seems too good to be true with Dany? I mean, I think that's what the scenes with Sir Davos and with Jon Snow, where they're asking Missandei whether or not she feels like she's a slave to Dany, and whether or not she could leave at any given time. And she answers, with these glowing reviews of Dany, and Sir Davos at the end says, well, is it too late for me to switch sides? But I think we're seeing that Tyrion thinks that all this could be a facade. He could see where Dany could be going down the path of a mad king. She could be eaten up by power. She's not a very savvy ruler at all. For her, she seems to be pulling from is this idea that she is stronger than her enemies, that with her dragons, she can defeat anyone, and they could ultimately be her demise.
There was a world prior to the current goings on where dragons were all over the place. And guess what? They're not. The idea that she feels invulnerable with the dragons is kind of mind-blowing. And now that we've seen a display of what they can do, you understand where she would have a great deal of confidence there. But at the same time, if it's you against the world, even 3 dragons isn't going to make a difference.
Yeah. Well, the last topic I want to close on with is the show pacing and why it seems like characters are traveling so fast. This is an extra packed episode. We try and close things down about 60 minutes, but there was just so much goodness in this episode. We had to talk about it. So our pacing is a little off while their pacing is a little fast as well. The conversation seems to be that compared to previous seasons, there's less exposition, there's less explaining, less focal point on the actual chess game that is going on between these characters, and more of a focus on a 20-minute battle with dragons and flames. And that has also led to some characters, or some people asking why the characters seem to be able to travel so fast around Westeros. Do you agree with these people, Gene?
Yeah, I mean, Euron moves from one side of a continent to another very quickly. The Dothraki moving with exceptional speed. At the same time, I think in this one, it's a bit forgivable. I had this conversation with King B last night, actually, which was the entire topic of the heroes. How the hell did I understand how dragons can get there so fast, but how the Dothraki get there? I go, what are you talking about? They're just upon them the next day. I go, no. You got to imagine there was at least probably several days, if not a week, between when you see the cart stop. You see Jaime stops the cart, he grabs the gold, he gives it to Bronn. He's giving him the gold because the cart's going away. And then they set Bronn and the Tarleys off to go, encourage the harvest to happen, farmers to load up their crops, convince them. You got to imagine that takes several days to pack that all up, get it on carts, and get it on the road. So when the Dothraki and Daenerys attack, you're talking that's, again, several days to possibly even a week after the last scene we saw. Otherwise, why would you see the Tarleys riding away if they were with, Jaime the whole time? They've now come back. So I think that they really did a good job of accounting for how much time has passed. They give you a very clear indication. Randall Tarley says, the gold has reached King's Landing.
If you didn't catch it the first time, the first scene, they're right outside Highgarden. And it's very lush. It's very green. Then when they're at Blackwater Rush, that's more of a landscape as they're closer to King's Landing. That's more of a Westworld type environment. I think we got the confirmation that the third world and in the upcoming season 2 area of Westworld, you're going to have Samurai World, you're going to have Westworld, and of course you're going to have Westeros World.
With surprisingly good effects.
Yeah, surprisingly very good effects. But also some people are also saying, well, okay, I'll excuse that. But the Cave of Convenience, the fact that here you have an area of Dragonstone that it took Samwell Tarly tricking a maester into giving him books that he then sent a raven down to Jon Snow and said, hey, there's this hidden cave that you've got to go and explore. It's got all this Dragonstone. Meanwhile, this cave, it's open. It's right next to the beach. There's no obstacles in its way. Is this just lazy writing?
Yeah, I thought maybe that they'd exposed it somehow. And if so, they really should have kind of shown you that, because it did feel a little silly that they're just like walking. They didn't have to crawl. It wasn't like a long walk. It was just like, let's grab a torch, come over here. Oh, there they are. But again, it might be the sort of thing that people were aware of the cave, and that wasn't the big deal. The big deal was neither of them had been there. They had not seen it for themselves, but people who lived at Dragonstone may have seen these drawings a long time ago and gone, okay, so, I mean, what does it mean to anybody, right? If I went and walked into a cave and I saw a bunch of drawings, I'd be like, all right, so there's some skeleton guy with a beard, okay.
It's not even that. It's shapes. Right. But I mean, listen, I went to Ruby Falls this summer. Ruby Falls, it's, I think, North America's largest indoor waterfall. And it was only found because this guy in the 1920s, because there was no internet in America at the time, decided that he wanted to go and rediscover the cave that he used to climb in when he was a young kid that had since been closed because of the train. And so he dug and he dug and he dug and he mined. Finally was able to crawl in this cave. It took him 17 hours to reach the waterfall. I think he had to crawl on his belly for 12 hours. There was none of that. None of that. It was just we're just going to go in and here they are. They're right this. There was no obstacles. So, I mean, is this an example of that type of rush pacing which throws off an audience like Game of Thrones?
I mean, I think so, yeah, but it also answers a question without going to a more ridiculous solution. For instance, we were talking about how would Jon prove it otherwise, and we were like, well, maybe he could capture a white and then bring it back. And then, of course, you had your entire freak show, with everybody showing their respective talents, like we're watching Heroes on NBC or something.
Westeros' Next Talent.
There you go.
Westeros Got Talent. That's it. No, listen, I agree. Well, so it can be safe to say that Dany understands that she'll be fighting with Jon Snow in the north now that she's seen these cave drawings that Sir Davos totally didn't draw.
Well, there's also that entire Instagram leak. So
yeah, exactly.
Flip things on their head.
Well, is there anything else you want to talk about before we close up shop here at the deep dive and get ready for Thursday's small council?
No, just thanks for sticking with us all this time. It's funny that the shortest episode, of course, comes up with potentially the longest recording we've ever had. But, again, there was so much to talk about. And I'm glad that the majority of the conversation actually wasn't about dragons or about fire, about putting armor on dragons, but rather that, we really talked about some of the depth and breadth that this episode had. And after talking about it, I feel like it's a little bit of a better episode than I gave it credit for. Still not the best.
I disagree. Well, that being said, that concludes this week's episode of On the Throne, Shout Out TV's Game of Thrones podcast. Be sure to follow us on social media. We're everywhere, including Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram. Just search for the handle Shout Out TV. We're also on Facebook, Shout Out TV Podcast. You can also see all of our Small Council emails and all of our episodes on our website, shoutontv.com. If you want to be part of the Small Council, our email address is hosts@shoutontv.com. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by iTunes, be sure to leave a 5-star review. That really helps the podcast grow. In fact, Gene, I had the whoa crazy today when I saw that we were number 3 in TV and film on iTunes today. Bonkers.
It's still mind blowing. I mean, I can't thank people enough for listening. On Snapchat, I got a few thank yous after the last Instacast we released, and that just really blows my mind that people are thanking us, calling us workhorses, saying that we put in all these hours and stuff. And for me, if you would have told me when we started this out that that thousands of people are going to listen and we're going to be in the top 10 on iTunes, there's no way I'd believe you. Yeah. Especially after our first podcast.
That's right. Well, if you like Shout on TV, you can also check out our sister podcast, Shat the Movies, where we review movies from the 80s and 90s that you, the audience, select. You can check out all the information over there at shatthemovies.com. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert, and Gene Lyons, I'm Roger Roper. Be sure to join us Thursday for the Game of Thrones Small Council. Take care, good night, and be sure to knock twice before joining us on the throne.